Hi everybody, I wanted to come and do a quick video on prevention. So primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. Just a quick video because I've been tutoring people lately and this has come up in some of the questions that we have been going over. So I just wanted to come and do this video so that we can try to distinguish between the three prevention ranges or periods, I guess. So the first one is primary prevention, and this is confusing for a lot of people because going from one step to the next is kind of confusing because it seems like sometimes when they give you a question it could be in either category. So with primary prevention, it aims to, of course, prevent disease or injury or disorder or whatever before it even occurs, before it even happens. So this is done by preventing exposures to the disease or to potential injury that could alter your health or your safety and things like that. So examples of primary prevention would be to have let's see, I want to give you a real life example. I don't want to just use what's on one of these questions. So I had a client last night who we were going over questions, and the suicide hotline was the answer for primary prevention. So we talked about primary prevention and suicide, and then we also talked about secondary and tertiary in relation to suicide. So suicide hotline would be primary prevention because having a hotline for someone who's contemplating completing suicide is the first step of prevention. So, and it was kind of confusing because even though the thought was there, while we discussed it, the client and I discussed the fact that secondary prevention is not the answer for suicide hotline. And I'm being very careful how I say things. So if I sound a little slow, then that's why. Okay, so primary prevention would be the suicide hotline because it prevents death before it occurs, even though the thought has already occurred. So then we get to secondary prevention. Secondary prevention aims to reduce the impact of a disease or injury or disorder that has already occurred. This is done by detecting and treating disease or injury or disorder as soon as possible in order to slow down the progress. Okay, so using the example of suicide, I told the client that when we think about secondary prevention and suicide, there's this bridge. I was reading this article recently. There's this bridge somewhere in an eastern country, I believe, that is responsible for the most completed suicide. So people have jumped off this bridge more than any other bridge or any other place to complete suicide. So there's this guy that stands at the bridge every weekend, and he does it voluntarily. And you may have read this because it was in the news like last week or earlier this week. And there's this guy that stands at the bridge to talk people down from jumping off of the bridge. So I said that's more like a secondary prevention rather than the suicide hotline being secondary prevention, because these are people who are already on the limb or the bridge who are ready to jump. So he's there to prevent them from jumping. So we have a person who's contemplating suicide. They call the suicide hotline, primary prevention. We have a person who is dead set, ready to complete suicide. They've given away all their belongings. This is their plan. They don't have anything else to live for, so they think, and they're at the bridge, they're ready to jump. So then this guy is standing there like, no, let's talk. You have more to live for. You have a purpose in life, or whatever he says to them to kind of talk them down. And he's been successful, according to that article. I forgot how many times, but I think they said he saved around 144 people. So that's great. So that would be secondary prevention. Okay, so then tertiary prevention aims to soften the impact of an ongoing illness or injury that has lasting effects. So, or disorder or issue or whatever. So, suicide is the topic that we're discussing here. So, if we then take this person who was contemplating suicide, they called the hotline, which was primary prevention. Then they went and they were ready to jump off the bridge, but we have this guy at the bridge talking them down, secondary prevention. And then now they've been talked down off the bridge. Now we're going to put them in a support group, which is tertiary prevention. So the fact that they have still the thoughts, even though they didn't complete suicide this time, we know that some people have multiple attempts. So even though they did not complete suicide, and I say complete rather than commit, it's because I've been taught in South Carolina. I want to make that clear for people who are very literal about things that I say. In South Carolina, I took a course called QPR, which is a suicide gatekeeper course, where they taught us that it's not committing suicide, is completing suicide. It may be different in your state. I'm throwing that out there for people who take everything I say literal to the whole nation. But anyway, so even though they didn't complete suicide the first time or the second time, we know that sometimes suicide is an ongoing issue for some people. And so this is tertiary prevention by putting them in a support group in hopes of softening the impact of the thought of completing suicide. So whatever they're going through, now that they're in this support group, maybe possibly there's somebody in the group who has similar issues to them that they can talk to and relate to, and then they can work together with this group, support group of people who want to commit suicide. So there you have it. You have primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary is to prevent disease or injury or disorder before it even occurs, and that's things like immunizations against infectious diseases, suicide. What's the other one that we use a lot? Using seatbelts to prevent death and accidents, those kind of things. Okay, secondary prevention aims to reduce the impact of a disease or disorder or injury that has already occurred. So this is like taking aspirin because you have a heart disease and you have a greater risk of heart attack. So you take a low dose aspirin every day to prevent heart disease or a heart attack. Or let's see. Okay, so tertiary is again to aim. Tertiary prevention aims to soften the impact of an ongoing illness or injury that has lasting effects. This is done by helping people manage long-term health problems, injuries, disorders like contemplating suicide. Okay, so hopefully that was quick enough for you, and hopefully it's detailed enough for you. If you have any questions, let me know. I had another person that I tutored this week that told me that they purchased a package with my videos in it. Again, all the content is free, so hopefully you're not paying for packages with free content. Like, subscribe, and share the videos, the channel with your colleagues and your friends. Leave a comment if you have any questions, or if you can contribute more to the conversation, then please do in the comment section or email me and we'll go from there. Alright, and be on the lookout for another video from me because I am going to try to do something a little more interactive with you all. Alright, so I'll see you next video.